Christmas a time of ghost stories? As in Victorian England, the festive season was not complete without a chill down your spine. Well, why blend a time of cheer with tales of terror? Let me tell you a story. To understand why the Victorians made ghost stories part of Christmas, we must travel back to an age of contradictions. It was the 19th century, a time of innovation and superstition. While trains roared across the land, many believed that ghosts still roamed among us. The tradition of sharing ghost stories during winter is actually an ancient one. In medieval times, the longest nights of the year were thought to thin the veil between the living and the dead. Families huddled together, distracting themselves from the howling winds with tales of the supernatural. This tradition is also tied to the winter solstice, which is the longest night of the year, which has been celebrated for centuries by various cultures. Pagan festivities like Yule marked a time when people believed, and some still do, that the spirit world was closer to our own. It's no coincidence that Christmas, with its themes of light and darkness, coincides with this ancient celebration. The Victorians took these old traditions and made them their own, and ghost stories found a home in houses like this one. Built in the 18th century and later expanded, Hughenden became a hub for Victorian life, bustling with grand parties, political intrigue, and some say ghosts. Seances and spiritualism were more than entertainment. They reflected a deep curiosity about the afterlife, which brings us here to Hughenden Manor, the perfect stage for us. This grand house was once the home of Benjamin Disraeli, who was Queen Victoria's favourite Prime Minister. There are a lot of ghost stories here, but they're for later. Stick with me. Back to the Victorians and their ghost stories. Nobody did Christmas quite like Charles Dickens. His A Christmas Carol, a ghost story, is a yuletide masterpiece. A tale of greed, redemption, and most importantly, ghosts. Ebenezer Scrooge is haunting by the ghost of his former partner, Jacob Marley, and the spirit of Christmas past, present, and future became an instant classic. But Dickens wasn't the only one. Emma James, the master of ghost stories, crafted chilling tales are still considered some of the creepiest ever written, and he'll read those aloud to his friends on Christmas Eve. Emma James's stories weren't just spooky. They were subtle and atmospheric, often featuring ancient curses and mysterious artifacts, perfect for a long night by the fire. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of the supremely rational Sherlock Holmes, was a believer in the supernatural. What's fascinating for me is how different were Doyle's beliefs compared to those of his creation. Doyle himself was drawn to the spiritual and the unexplainable. This contrast makes Doyle's writing all the more intriguing. Elizabeth Gaskell, Wilkie Collins, and Algernon Blackwood also contributed to this chilling tradition. Each of their tales captured the Victorian obsession with the unknown. But why were the Victorians so obsessed with ghosts, the occult, and ghost stories at Christmas? Back in Victorian times, the tradition of sharing ghost stories on Christmas Eve hit its peak. And the big reason for that was the explosion of magazines and newspapers, as the stamp duty that made magazines and newspapers expensive was finally scrapped. At the same time, the Industrial Revolution made printing faster and cheaper, allowing publishers to commercialize oral ghost stories. Magazines and newspapers publishers, as well as writers, jumped at the opportunity. I mean, what better way to keep those readers hooked during those long, cold winter nights? right? It was a time of rapid change. The Industrial Revolution brought new technologies, while scientific advancements challenged traditional beliefs. The supernatural was a response to the Victorian crisis of faith. In this era of progress, there was a longing to connect to something more. The popularity of spiritualism with its seances and mediums reflected this desire. Ghost stories offered the way to explore these themes in an entertaining and safe way. Today, the tradition of telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve has faded a bit, but it's not gone. Whether you're reading Christmas Carol or revisiting the works of Emma James, there is still something magical about sharing a spooky tale on a cold winter's night. Today, Hughenden Manor still carries echoes of the Victorian age, but beyond political intrigue, the manor holds darker tales. Disraeli is buried in a vault beneath St. Michael's Church, and is said to haunt the house. He's been seen on the upper floor, in his former office, and sometimes smiling at the bottom of the stairs. Other strange reports are the scent of an old-fashioned perfume and a phantom Victorian gentleman seen strolling around the woods. No, that's just my daughter. So this Christmas, why not embrace your inner Victorian? Light a candle, tell a ghost story. After all, nothing says Merry Christmas like a good scare.